The difference between a Christian school and a secular school consists not so much in what is taught, but in the purpose for learning it. When God created man, He commanded him to subdue and develop the earth for the glory of God. This command is to be taught in such a way as to show that there are many paths of service in this life which bring God glory.
I think God just moved people to say, oh, this is critical, this is important, we need to really get serious about this.
I think it was like the school that should never have happened, and yet it did, and actually along the way flourished in ways that we didn't even recognize early on.
It's exciting. Did I know in 1980 where this was going? No, and so now in 2019, I don't know where those next 50 years are going to go, the twists and turns, but I can know God was faithful in those 50 years. God will be faithful in the next 50 years.
The first attempt to create a Christian school in the Beaver Valley occurred in 1962. Although some progress was made, the plans never developed further. In the following years, there were a number of meetings to regenerate the interest. On one occasion, Reverend Joel Niederhood, who was associated with the Christian Reformed Church and the Christian school movement, encouraged the audience to begin a new effort to provide children with a Christ-centered education. In 1966 and again in 1967, Geneva College, located in Beaver Falls, hired teachers who had been active in Christian schools and who were concerned to provide their children with a Christian education. As a result, the movement toward achieving this goal was renewed and new plans were set in motion.
We had just moved from Kansas to Beaver Falls, and there was this talk of a Christian school. I thought that's kind of interesting. My only experience with Christian schools had been in Kansas, where I was familiar with a K through 12 program, but it was primarily a daily vacation Bible school. So I wasn't turned on by that principle in that sense. So I actually went to the first meeting out of pure curiosity to say, what are these people going to do?
The first concern was to draw up a constitution to provide directions for the school's activities. The document began with an affirmation of the basic core of Christian truths: faith in the triune God, salvation in Jesus Christ, and the revelation of God's Word in the Scriptures of the Old and New Testaments. With the creation of a school board, preparation leading to opening the Beaver County Christian School began. An effort was made to identify those who might be interested in enrolling their children. It was decided that the school would begin with grades 1 and 2, and that a teacher would be employed. A possible location for the opening of the school was made available: the First Reformed Presbyterian Church located in Beaver Falls. The church was pastored by Reverend David Armstrong, who was serving on the school's board of directors. The church building had recently been renovated and classrooms had been added that would serve a school well. The final and most important concern was that of securing a teacher. The Education Committee surveyed the possible candidates known to be in the area and prepared to begin interviewing. Very early in the effort, the name of Louise Marshall was proposed. She was currently teaching in California and had 5 years' experience teaching the first grade. Reverend David Armstrong and others who had known her when they all attended Geneva College strongly advocated her hiring.
I said, who in the world's Carl Cunningham? I had no idea. And he was asking me basically if I would be interested in coming back and teaching in a Christian school. And my first reaction was, are you kidding me? I loved California. I was a beach bum. I grew up in Youngstown and went to Geneva, and I had no intentions of coming back to Beaver Falls.
Bruce Miller and I were to interview Louise. Those of you who know Louise well will appreciate this, especially because early on in the discussion, Louise wanted to know how many students am I going to have. We frankly didn't know. So Louise just kind of relaxed, we'll get to that. Well, about 2 minutes later, how many students am I going to have? So we finally said, well, Louise, we're pretty sure there's going to be 4. 4? What on earth? I left my job in California. What am I going to? Can you teach 5 children? Well, Louise, can you teach? Yeah, okay. I said, you let us worry about everything.
Hopes were high in the spring of 1968 that classes could begin in the fall. Upon learning of the level of preparation needed, she felt the school was not ready to begin that quickly. The Education Committee began interviewing several possible teachers for the fall, and a number of them were recommended to the board. But the support of Miss Marshall was so strong that it was decided to put off opening the school for another year.
I was teaching at Pasadena Christian at the time. I went to the principal, I said, what can I do to get these people off my back? And she said, well, this is what they need to do before they hire a teacher. They have to have a board, they have to have a mission statement, or and they have to have a facility and a certain number of students, and they have to have a principal. And so I wrote this back to Carl, and a year later they said, well, we've done all that, now will you come? So that's when I finally realized that, okay, this is what God wants me to do.
The years of planning were at an end, and Beaver County Christian School had become a reality by the grace of God. The opening of BCCS took place on September 2, 1969, when 12 first and second graders took their seats in the basement of the First Reformed Presbyterian Church. Louise Marshall opened with prayer, then reading, writing, and arithmetic followed. The school year passed with general satisfaction in the work of Miss Marshall and the progress of the children as demonstrated by their scores on the standardized achievement tests. Toward the end of the school year, the Board of Directors made a number of important decisions regarding the coming fall semester. The school would continue to meet in the First Reformed Presbyterian Church, and grades 3 to 6 were to be added. All that was needed for the next term was another teacher. Once again, Reverend Armstrong had a teacher in mind and went to work persuading her to accept the position.
I was teaching in a public school, and I was not really very interested in becoming a Christian school teacher. I had a stereotype about Christian school teachers, and they wore their dresses, below the knee, and sturdy shoes and stuff like that, and there were a lot of rules and kids. So I was interested in what they were doing at Beaver County Christian School, but I wasn't interested personally. And Dave Armstrong started this conversation by saying, I know that you're not really interested in becoming teaching at the Christian school, but the Beaver County Christian School Board met last night, and we decided that we were going to ask you to take on the job of teaching grades 4, 5, and 6. They were going to add 4 grades in 1 year. And so we talked about that. At the beginning of the phone call, I was not interested. I don't know how long we talked, half an hour maybe? And I had decided, yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to do that. So it was obviously, I don't think it was Dave Armstrong persuasion, it was obviously the Holy Spirit.
Over the 1973 to 74 school year, several severe challenges had arisen that needed a solution prior to the opening of the school in the fall. The continual growth of the student population and the increasing acceptance of the school by the community encouraged the board to plan for an increase in the number of classes. The decision was made to make the leap to a complete high school for the 1974 school year. It was also agreed that a principal would be needed as well as 4 teachers, to whom would hopefully be part-time and possible volunteers. The decision led immediately to another major concern. A much larger facility to house these new grades would be necessary. The churches that had been housing the school would not be available in the coming school year. The pressure to locate a building for the fall became all-consuming. When all seemed hopeless, the Lord stepped in and met the need with a building that was more than we had ever considered. The Kenwood School at 601 Penn Avenue in New Brighton was purchased for the amazing price of less than $10,000.
I still think people that sent their kids to that building must have just been called by God, because, I mean, we thought we had died and gone to heaven because we had our own building. But oh my goodness, what a mess it was.
But you know, they had to do everything. They stripped floors. You couldn't even imagine what was on they were tile floors. And when they got them stripped, they were not too bad. You know, it was just an old building and lots of issues with it.
I think we bought it in July, and Jimmy Dobbs, who did plastering, he came in and replastered. I mean, and by August it was repainted and replastered.
Well, you know, interestingly enough, it was a relief to see even this old leftover abandoned building, because I think we were in 5 different church basements every 2 years for 10 years. So to see a building, even as dilapidated as it appeared, was very, very encouraging.
The high school at that time was upstairs and I was downstairs, so I didn't have the trouble with all the drip. But every classroom had buckets where the dripped. We just put up with it, you know.
The interesting solution by one of the members was we could spread some plastic down and hold the plastic down with tires. So we collected dozens and dozens of tires and hauled them up on the roof to hold the tarps down. It might have helped a little bit, but we still had buckets.
Put the plastic over the tires and so on it, and it leaked anyway then, you know. So they had to tear off the roof. So they got a bunch of people together this one day to come in and tear off the old build-up roof. So a contractor would come in and spray foam roof, seal it up. And so they all gathered that Saturday morning to tear it off, and had their shovels and everything ready. And it began to rain as they were working. And thinking, oh no, it's raining now, or Lord, how could you do this? We got everybody together to finally get this roof moving along. And they soon discovered, as the roof became wet, that it was actually easier to remove the old roof than it was when it was dry. And somehow that water got in there and lubricated, loosened things, and they were able to clean it much more quickly and thoroughly. And so, as John Barclay tells the story, you know, the God's sovereign hand was there even in sending rain, which at first they saw as a curse, not a blessing, but turned out to be a real blessing.
In 1975 to 76, the school year saw the first full-time administrator. Mr. Peter Bloom came from Canada and served the school well. At the end of the year, he returned to his home to take up his life's work as the director of a Christian youth camp. This year saw the beginnings of a significant part of the school program when the school made its first attempt at producing a play. Under the direction of Paul Kilpatrick, the students presented Abraham and Isaac and Everyman. The productions were well received and laid the groundwork for many excellent productions in the future. Summer of 1978 brought 2 new members to the school staff who would make valuable contributions for the years to come. The need for a principal had been a concern for some time, and several applicants had been interviewed. One of those who applied was Mr. Ralph Phillips.
I was first introduced to BCCS back in 1970, mid-70s. I just knew of its existence because I was interested in Christian education. I actually wanted to go into Christian education as a teacher. I was certified as a biology general science instructor. I taught at Portersville Christian School then for 1 year actually, and I thought I'd be interested in teaching science at BCCS. They already had a science teacher, they didn't need another one at the time, but I knew of the school's reputation as a good school academically, and also of its Reformed heritage, which really interested me since I came from Westminster Seminary, interested in Reformed faith and particularly in education, Christian education from that perspective. And because of connections with Geneva and folks from Geneva. That's how I heard of BCCS. One evening I was sitting in the kitchen. I can still remember very clearly, the phone rang. It was David Harvey. Dr. Harvey taught at Geneva at the time, and he was the president of the board at BCCS. And he called and to ask, he said he didn't know me personally, I never met him, but he said, I heard from a board member that you went to Westminster and you're interested in Christian education. You're in the area, we're looking for a principal. He says, I'm not offering you the job, but I'm seeking applicants. Would you be interested in applying? I said, oh, I don't know, can I think about this and call you back? Okay. I never thought that I wanted to be a bureaucrat. And so I just wanted to teach. And so I talked to my wife, Sandy, about it. What do you think? She said, why don't you go ahead and apply? It won't hurt anything. So I did. And to my surprise, I was called in for an interview. Interviewed for a couple hours with the board. I knew some of the people on the board. They were my former teachers at Geneva College. And then after the one interview, okay, and I left, and some little time went by and they called me back and said, we'd like to come back for a second interview. And so Dave Harvey kind of facilitated this as the board president, and came back for the second interview, and not too long after that they offered me the position. So I entered the world of educational bureaucracy, I guess.
In 1978, another faithful member of the faculty was hired. Mr. Doug Carson began teaching English in the high school, and 2 years after arriving at the school, he accepted the position of assistant administrator.
Well, I first came to BCCS as a teacher, and I came in 1980. I had graduated from Geneva in 1975. My parents had moved to Southern California. I went out to Southern California and I started teaching in a Lutheran Christian school out in North Hollywood. If you're familiar with the Hollywood sign, it's on the other side of the Hollywood sign, North Hollywood. And that's actually where I met my wife, so that was the big thing about being that time in Southern California. But we both decided that we didn't want to raise a family in LA. So we started looking around for jobs. Of course, I was familiar with the area, and so I knew that BCCS had an opening for an English teacher. I applied, I interviewed in that main hallway in the Kenwood school. The board members were seated around folding tables in the hallway, and I can still, you tend to remember your job interviews, and I remember being interviewed there.
Early in 1991, the board became aware of the availability of the West Park School in West Mayfield, near Beaver Falls. The board entered into negotiations with the Black Hawk School District and purchased the building for the amazing price of $61,000. The summer of 1991 was a very busy time. Much had to be done to prepare for the coming school year. Fortunately, the task was mild in comparison with that required by the purchase of the Kenwood building. For the first time, a real play area was available for the children at recess and during the lunch period. West Park reopened the opportunity to provide a middle school program. The second floor was to be used for the 6th and 7th grades, and Miss Lynn worked at providing an appropriate curriculum for these grades. Later, the 8th grade would be added to the program.
But we walked through that building, and when I went into that building, it had its own little bathroom, and those windows are, that looked over to the field across the street. And again, we just thought we had died and gone to heaven because, and I said to Ralph Phillips, this is the first grade teacher. This is the first grade room, and every other teacher in the building through the years would change classrooms. They put the 5th grade down there and then the 4th grade, and not me. I stayed in that room the whole entire time, and that was the first grade room. So,
and that's when the school split. At that point, I think it split 7 through 12 stayed in New Brighton, and K through 6 went to West Park. And then 7th grade made their way over there, and eventually 8th grade would make their way over there to create those middle school grades 6, 7, and 8. And that's really when I became principal, because Ralph went to the West Park building, and the original idea is that he would be principal over both buildings. But that was far enough away, that really didn't work. And I started making more and more administrative decisions. And I can remember telling Ralph, hey, if I'm going to do all this work, you might as well just call me the high school principal. And I became the high school principal.
And he was at Penn Avenue, and I was sort of like the elementary, middle school principal at West Park. And so he ran that building down there, and I ran the building at West Park, basically. I mean, the other people ran, the teachers ran, but we were the administrators in charge. And he's a tremendous guy. Mr. Carson's he's the best.
4 years after the purchase of West Park, the 37th Street School was added to BCCS. God, in His providence, had been preparing for this to occur. In the early 1990s, Dr. Clare and his wife, Melba Brown Merriman, became interested in the school. Dr. Merriman was a pediatrician who spent most of his life caring for children. The Merrimans had met the needs of the school on several occasions prior to the purchase of the building. A set of handbells as well as a fine piano were purchased to aid the music program. The Merrimans also provided for the development of a computer laboratory. When the 37th Street School became available, they provided a substantial portion of the money needed to purchase and later reconstruct the interior of the building. Shortly after the building was purchased, both Dr. and Mrs. Merriman went to be with the Lord, and the building was appropriately named the Merriman Campus. Once again, it became clear that our God is able to do immeasurably more than we ask or think.
There'll be somebody 50 years from now, and it won't be me, I'll be gone, but recounting stories like we are today of God's faithfulness at BCCS.
It was very encouraging to see people take an interest and become involved and recognize the need and the challenge. So that was a rewarding experience to see that positive response to that effort.
It was being able to integrate my faith in the things that I taught. For years I prayed, Lord, show me when you want me to retire, because I loved what I did. I loved the kids.
It's not usually like big things we do. It's just a lot of little acts of obedience. And I see that in the parents and the board members and associate members of school over the years. Just a lot of small acts of obedience, hard work, just pitching in and helping make it work. And it's just an honor and blessing to be part of that and to see that happening.
It was the meaningful work to be engaged in. We use the term kingdom work, and that, yes, to work with young people, to work with families, to be involved in Christian education that I still believe has so much power and so much meaning. So that was a great gift to me for my life, to be able to be involved in meaningful work. And I did take 1 year off, and God gave me meaningful work while I did that, but within less than 12 months, He opened the door for me to come back to BCCS, and I've been very happy to do that. So
I liked it. BCCS was like family, and you felt connected, and especially with large families, families that I had all their kids, and you think, well, I can't quit until I've had the last one. And obviously at some point I did.
And I had my animals and rabbits and gerbils and hamsters and hermit crabs and turtles. Not all at once, but through the years I'd say, okay, where's the hermit crab? And somebody would have it crawling around at their desk.
people looked forward to these cheese sales. I mean, it got to where they were like, yeah, when's the next cheese sale? And you distribute these catalogs, people give them back with, $100 here, $80 there, $300 there, and it added up. It just got to be grandparents, parents, friends, all in there, working day in, day out, way into the night, packing orders.
Pounds and pounds and pounds of cheese for 2 or 3 or 4 years to make money. That was all in the New Brighton building.
Naomi Horner ran that thing. I mean, it was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in that operation.
So, to this day, after all those sales of cheese, I've finally been able to enjoy cheese.
I jokingly, it was so hard on me doing the renovations of the Merriman campus and moving us into there. And I could go on and on and on with stories about that. But I will tell you this one story, and that is that I said when I was done with that, I would never do that was it for me and renovating buildings, and that's it. And that it would have to be somebody else who would do the next one. And of course, those of us that are believers know you never make statements like that because of God's sense of humor. You'll wind up doing that. And here I am back leading us through another expansion phase. And it's been great. God has provided. It's unbelievable. I'd say miraculous. We've been able to purchase the St. Philomena's building. We've been able to renovate it with funds in hand. The school has seen remarkable growth in the past 4 or 5 years, and all that at rock bottom I attribute to God's blessing, His grace, His goodness to us. So over and over, from people, the most important things, to these other ways that we see God providing.
I think what's happening right now has been worth waiting for.
BCCS has been the recipient of an amazing assortment of men and women who have served on the boards and committees that give support and direction to the school. A listing of outstanding examples of such individuals would be too time-consuming to attempt, but anyone who has served in these capacities would testify to the quality of the leadership of the school. A host of others who have volunteered their time and effort should be recognized. Grandparents, drivers, playground assistants, coaches, teachers, secretaries, volunteers, and janitors all have had a part in the story of Beaver County Christian School. We must conclude by making clear that in all that has taken place in the founding and continuation of the school, we must give God the glory. Surely He has fulfilled His promise to be with us and to meet our every need. Surely He has done and continues to do far more than we asked or even imagined.